At that point, I didn't have a healthy relationship with failing. I didn't see it as an opportunity to try again and learn something in that moment. Greetings, my name is Z and welcome to Checkpoint 30. And this is where we cultivate habits, embrace growth, and redefine success. In today's episode, we'll explore why embracing failure is not just an option, but a necessity for personal and professional development. It's quite easy to know a word. If I asked you what failure is, you'll probably be like, yeah, I know what it is. But it's also easy to forget the depth in the meaning of it. The best definition that I could find online was failure is the social concept of not meeting a desirable or intended objective, and is usually viewed as the opposite of success. The criteria for failure depends on context and may be relative to a particular observer or a belief system. The last line is very important for the duration of this episode. The criteria for failure may be relative to a belief system. To make it easy, I'm going to break down this episode into three main categories: the underlying factor, the problem, and lastly, the solution. The underlying factor is we are taught to fear failure. And it all starts in school. Everything we did in school created a belief system that suggests that your development and success are built on avoiding failure. And this later on extends into adulthood, but we'll talk about that. However, in contrast, from the time you are born up until you go to school, which for most people is the age of 5 or 6, your development and success is dependent on embracing failure. Interesting shift there. There's a general understanding and acceptance by your parents or the people around you when you're a baby that the more times you fail, the better it is for you, because you will eventually get it right. So if you're trying to walk, the more times you actually try and fail is good, because you eventually will walk. You eventually will learn from trying and failing over and over again. But when you go to school, the systems shift. Don't get me wrong, I believe schools teach good systems. But at the same time, I believe they come with bad or negative ones. And the fear to fail is unfortunately one of them, because we have grading systems in the form of tests and exams. And if you went to a school like mine, where if you were a top student, then you went into the A classes, and if you failed a lot, then you went into the B classes, just so that everyone knows where they stand in life. And at that time, life for us was school. We didn't know anything apart from that. If you made it in school, you had made it in life. And equally, if you had failed in school, then you had failed in life, which is something that I'm going to argue in this episode. I did 7 years of primary school, 6 years of secondary school, and 4 years of university. And that's a total of 17 years in a school system. That's a long time to create good belief systems in anyone, but that's also equally a very long time to create bad ones. That is enough time to build a negative relationship with failure, because the general assumption is the more times you fail, the highly likely you are to be nothing more than a failure in life. Everything about failing becomes super negative. You don't embrace it. It almost affects you in the opposite way, because I think the general goal of school systems and grading and all of that is to motivate students to do better and actually pass and succeed. However, I think for most students, it actually works in the opposite direction, because now you have a negative relationship towards failing, which brings me to the second category, which is the problem. The problem is you stop trying again and trying new things. Remember, I gave an example of in your first 5 years, you explore as a child and you do so many things. You try, but you fail and you don't really care. You try again because failure is nothing more than a stepping stone and nothing less than motivation to keep on trying. The general belief by a child and parents is that the more times you try and fail at something, the sooner you will get it right. But when you've gained reason, you've gained knowledge, you've been to school, the school system makes you believe that the more times you fail at something, the more likely you are never to get it right, even with other things in life, which is something that I don't agree with. Failure becomes a recall and demotivation to try again. I did well in primary. I actually passed really well, was one of the top students, I like to believe. And I did well in secondary, or at least up until Form 4, which is O-level. And in A-level, that's when things started to shift. I didn't do well. I wrote 3 subjects and I failed. I failed a bunch of tests in between. But in my final exam, I failed 2 of my 3 subjects. That was a very difficult time in my life because it's like my world almost shattered. Apart from disappointing my parents, it was a time where I didn't want to be anywhere. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to go to places. I didn't want to meet people. I didn't want to talk to people. And thankfully, at the time, social media wasn't, there was Facebook then, there was WhatsApp was still very new. Phones then didn't even have background refreshing. So you couldn't know someone sent you a message, or you'd have to open the app and have the internet load the messages. And things were not there. Like there were no status updates. People were not posting every day about whatever's going on. So people were not necessarily into your space that much. But I spent a lot of time just at home. I didn't want to be asked because, as soon as you write final exams for the next 3 months or so, people are just going to be asking, oh, so what did you get? Did you pass? I generally think my parents are people, if I may put it that way. So at church, my mom is like, she knows everyone. And, my dad is like businessman. So, it's like, there's just an expectation that, we need to know what their son did. And their son failed. It was a very difficult time, but thankfully, I came out of the ditch that I was in, and I wrote again a year later, and I passed, and eventually went to university. University was, again, I didn't fail anything. I just passed everything. Actually, I did way better than I expected myself to do, and I successfully graduated. But that one point where I failed, it was a dark season, if I may put it that way. But that's because at that point, I didn't have a healthy relationship with failing. I didn't see it as an opportunity to try again and learn something in that moment. I was thinking this is the end of my life. This is the end of everything. Because remember, I told you in school, all we believed was school is life. So if you succeed in school, you've succeeded in life. If you fail in school, you failed. I felt like, I can never be anything anymore. This is the boat that I was supposed to be on, and I've missed it. So everyone else is going, and I'm staying behind. And thankfully, my life took a shift, which brings me to the solution. I work in the advertising industry, and I'm self-taught. When I was pursuing my degree, which is in insurance and risk management, completely opposite fields, I know, I was simultaneously learning and working as a designer. That fire that a child has when they jump from a bench and they fall, and 10 minutes later, they're back on the same bench and they jump again because they're like, look, I don't care. I'm just going to do it again. That's the fire that I had. That's the energy that I had, maybe consciously, but probably subconsciously. Looking back at it now, I realized that I actually had a lot of failures. If I look at some of the stuff that I did, then the designs that I made, I'm just like, what was that? But I didn't really care at the time. I was just trying. This is also a great part to shout out to my friends who were my dorm mates at the time. Shout out to Nick, Bilani, Chico. They really helped me out in kickstarting my career. We, at the time, felt like we need to make new designs for our university, like t-shirts and hoodies. I made some designs. We printed some t-shirts and we sold them, I think, over the course of 2 to 3 semesters. And everything from there is just history. I went into layout design, I went into motion design, and everything that I now do. And most importantly, when I look at it in retrospect, because I never went to school or formal school for advertising, I didn't have a system built in me to say you can or you can't do A, B, C, and D. In my head, I would just think of something and be like, there's a way, I just need to find it. And I'll just go. So there were no boundaries. There was no system in me to say, the more you try this, the more you're not going to succeed. There was no failing at that point. It was more just explore until you find. Failures for me at that point were not brick walls. They were not demotivations. There were opportunities. There was experience to be able to actually know how things work, know how the applications that I use work, know how the industry works, and know how to deal with clients. Having been in the industry for 8 years now and having worked with some industry leading brands, I can safely say that I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't embraced failure, if I hadn't embraced just taking the fall and picking myself up and going again. It took a lot of trying things continuously and figuring it out. And there are so many concepts, there's so many designs that I made that never saw the light of day, but they were good for my experience. They were good for learning. They were good because in as much as it was a failed event, a failed pitch, a failed design, it was experience, it was lessons, it was opportunities to keep on going, keep on doing better, and to get closer to success. I think my journey in pursuing my career really helped me realize that you can figure out a lot of things if you have a healthy relationship with failure. If you see failure as something that you need to actually pursue, not in the sense of actively wanting to fail, but in the sense of understanding that for you to eventually succeed or eventually do something, failure is going to be involved. And the sooner you do it, the better it is for you and the more likely you are to succeed sooner. And when I look back at it now, I honestly, I don't know where and how, but I suppose for now we can call it passion. But I don't know why I just felt like I have finished 17 years of school, and probably half of those were I focused on the commercial side of things, and I've graduated, and I'm just going to leave all of that and pursue advertising, which is something that I didn't spend 17 years learning. I mean, of course, some of the subjects that I learned there kind of apply to my life now. So, for example, communication skills and all of that, and the business related stuff. But I generally never focused on going the advertising route. So I left that and I chose to do something that most likely was gonna be a failed event. I still remember telling my parents that I want to pursue a career in graphic designing. And I think for them, they actually didn't know what it was at the time. It was very confusing for them because they're like, dude, why did we pay for university fees for you to just not use your degree? What's going on? But grace to my parents, they allowed me to pursue my journey, even though they didn't really know what was going to come out of it. So I left my home country, came to Namibia. I had already worked back home as a designer for myself and for a few companies. And I moved to Namibia and I got a job here as well. And everything from there is just a growth journey, let me put it that way. And I feel like there's a point where my parents saw how successful I was and how successful I was becoming. And they turned from people that didn't know what graphic design was to being like, do you know what my son does? Yeah, my son designs things. And I'm like, All right. Now I see. I see you. I mean, I'm happy for them. But most importantly, I'm happy for myself and thankful because I maybe learned something from my past, from my failures, and from picking myself up that really failure is not something to fear, but something to embrace in the sense of actually moving forward and getting to your goals, which is success, sooner. And if I was to put everything that I've just shared in a line, it would be see failure differently, see failure as a necessary step to eventually achieve success. Unfortunately, not every success story is a one hit wonder or one attempt type of situation. It takes a collective set of failures to get there. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in, coming from the belief systems that we got from school and in an Instagram world where everything is a finished product, no one fails, everyone is successful, everyone is beautiful, everyone owns a car at the age of 20, everyone bought their house at the age of 18, everyone just looks amazing. That is not reality. Reality is it takes failures to eventually get there. I actually have an episode that I need to do on social media, but we'll talk about it then. I honestly hope that this was helpful. This is my first episode, and please let me know if you actually enjoy this kind of content and if you want to hear more, what you think, how I did. If you have any additions, subtractions, or corrections, I will gladly appreciate any of the above. Apart from that, my name is Z, and this is Checkpoint 30. Until next time, cheers.